Welcome everyone to this webinar tonight, brought to you by Nillumbik Shire Council on eucalypts of northeast Melbourne. Sorry, I'll just put my phone on silent because that's embarrassing. I'll firstly acknowledge that we're on Wurundjeri country today. Well, I am, and this presentation will focus on eucalypts around Wurundjeri country, and pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and elders past, present and emerging. Perhaps you'd like to put the traditional owners of the land you're viewing from in the chat function. Down the bottom you'll find the chat and the Q&A, and you can use them as you wish. We'll save up all the questions that you've got till the end, and then we can ask our presenters, Julia Franco and Emma Sorrentino. Julia is a biodiversity officer with Nillumbik Shire Council, and Emma is works at the Edendale Nursery, Indigenous Nursery. Both of our experts here today have freaky secret talents in plant ID. Don't laugh, it's very serious. Julia, you can present her with a leaf or any small piece of a plant. She'll be able to tell you what it is. Magical. And Emma, this is even cooler. Emma can actually smell a plant and know it's a lily, or it's this particular type of lily. Don't you think that's amazing? So I'll just leave those two exciting fun facts there. You've got fantastic hosts tonight. And yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this presentation about northeast Melbourne eucalypts. Take it away, Julia.
Thanks, Steph. I'll just start to share my screen and we can get started. And I will just turn my camera off just because that helps sometimes with the presentation as well. So welcome everyone to the Eucalypts of Northeast Melbourne presentation. As Steph said, I'm Julia Franco. I'm the Biodiversity Officer at Nillumbik Shire Council. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting tonight, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and future, and to the elders of other communities who may be here tonight. I also want to acknowledge the special connection our First Peoples have with the eucalypt species. They were used extensively and for so many different reasons, including for traditional ceremonies, as well as being very important for food, fibre and medicinal purposes. So why focus on eucalypts? Well, they're pretty amazing species. They are one of our most recognisable plants, and not just in Australia, but across the world. They occupy a large range of habitats, from damp forests, woodlands, swamps to alpine areas. And eucalypts are the most common species in Melbourne, the most commonly grown species in the world, and are fairly easy to recognise. However, as common as they are, how well do we actually know or understand them? So tonight I'm going to run through some general information about eucalypts, the basics of their identification and what to look for, and a little bit more of an in-depth look at the eucalypts of northeast Melbourne, including where each local species grows and why. And then Emma will go into what's best for your revegetation project and other things. So let's start with some fun general facts before we move into the more serious topics. A study by paleobotanist Maria Gandolfo and Associates found that eucalypts are quite an old species, and they evolved around the time of Gondwana, with fossils found in Patagonia, which date approximately 51.9 million years old. Now, as you can see, these fossil records look much like the eucalypts you might see in your backyard. So they think they evolved much earlier than this. The word eucalyptus comes from the meaning for well, yew, and covered, calyptos, which was first coined by the French botanist, I'm terrible with French names, so let's just call him Charles, in 1788. And the first eucalypt species to be named by Europeans was Eucalyptus obliqua, or messmate stringy bark. Now, the reason why I have a photo of a beach here is because this specimen of Eucalyptus obliqua was collected in 1788 from Adventure Bay in Bruny Island, Tasmania. And this became the type specimen for all the genus of Eucalyptus. I was lucky enough to visit Adventure Bay earlier this year, and this is me here, naive to what lay ahead, and before pre-lockdown, looking much happier and healthier. Eucalypts are almost uniquely Australian, although some species are found in New Caledonia, New Guinea, Sulawesi and Mindanao in the Philippines, and the white gum Eucalyptus alba is found on Timor. But eucalypts are also the most widely planted hardwood species in the world, and they are used for both amenity and forestry. They're very well adapted to dry conditions and fire, including the way that they can resprout from lignotubers or dormant buds which lie under the bark. They also have hard woody capsules that protect the seeds high up in the canopy, where heat may be intense but lasts for a very short time as the oil-rich leaves burn rapidly. And some eucalypt species, such as stringy bark, have developed thick fibrous bark which acts as insulation, allowing the tree to survive moderate fires. When it comes to leaf adaptations, the juvenile leaves are usually held horizontally to maximise light absorption, but then the adult leaves twist and droop downwards. They hang vertically to reduce exposure to high levels of radiation from the sun and to reduce water loss. Now, the gum nuts, unfortunately, are actually fruit, which contain tiny seeds inside. In botanical terms, a nut implies that a shell does not open on its own to release a seed like a hazelnut. However, in eucalypts, once the valve of the fruit dry and open up, the seeds can be released. So, what makes a eucalypt a eucalypt? Well, the basic defining features of a eucalypt is the leaves are aromatic and contain these oil glands, as you can see dotted around here on a very zoomed up leaf. The flowers have numerous stamens with the sepals and petals effectively absent, and the flowers on the local species are all cream and white. In eucalypts, the petals and sepals are joined to form this cap that's pointing up here over the bud called the operculum. And the fruit is generally woody. When it comes to the identification of eucalypts, it can be quite confusing to begin with, as many of the eucalypt species have a similar appearance. You can use a dichotomous key like this, which may be fun for some, but can be quite confusing and complicated for others. However, there are a number of different characteristics to look for when identifying them, which makes the process just that little bit easier. However, also, no single feature should be relied upon. The variation in appearance that occurs at different stages of each life cycle of each species and the environmental conditions should also be considered. So if you're looking at identifying eucalypts, it's good to take note of the habitat in which it is growing, so whether it's near water, in a gully or on a ridge, its size and the shape of the tree, the colour and texture of the bark, fruits and leaves, the shape and size of the buds, leaves or fruits, how many fruits and buds they have and how they are arranged, and any other feature peculiar to the tree, such as the shape and growth of the juvenile leaves. When we focus in more on the eucalypts of northeast Melbourne, our eucalypts are mainly considered to be part of dry eucalyptus woodland. There are around 40 Indigenous species of eucalypts in this area, with the most common in our region being the red box, longleaf box, yellow box, red stringy bark, and messmate, amongst a whole range. But these are generally suited to the dry, shallow soils that we see in northeast Melbourne. And in order to help identify the different ones, let's start with habitat. Now, as you move across the landscape, knowing where a eucalyptus species occurs can help you narrow down your ID. This illustration here shows the typical habitats of northeast Melbourne. I did happen to do a few years of botanical illustrations, and unfortunately this is the best I could come up with, so unfortunately that's saying something. But as you can see, each species has their own ecological niche or unique place in which they grow. And it's really useful to familiarise yourself with those habitats, because if you know where you are in the landscape, this can help you narrow down the species you are looking at and rule out others. You do have to take this with a grain of salt though, because their habitats can overlap as well. But in general terms, on a dry hilltop, you don't expect to see candlebarks or manna gums. Rather, you likely see red box or a mix of stringy bark and box species. And then, of course, along the rivers, you won't expect to see red box, but rather you might see manna gums or swamp gums, those eucalypts that tolerate more deeper soils. So as you move through the landscape, you will see this shift in the types of eucalypts that grow there. Of course, these aren't hard boundaries, so you may see the different species growing within the ecotones or these shifts in their habitats. And this is a real general illustration as well. It all depends on aspect, and also when you move into the Kinglake Ranges, it changes again as you move into the much wetter forest or high rainfall area with species such as mountain grey gums. So I'm going to go through a few different photos which are examples of these types of habitats and the eucalypts that grow there. So this is firstly a dry exposed hillside dominated by red box. An exposed north-facing hillside with mixed box and stringy bark species. A sheltered slope with yellow box. A gully dominated by candlebarks. A swampy depression with swamp gums. The major creeks and rivers with manna gum. So that's the Diamond Creek there and the Yarra River. And a south-facing or sheltered slope with a mix of messmate, peppermint and box species. So the bark that's on a eucalypt is another very useful aid in identification. So I'm going to run through a few of the different types of bark, which might also help you. The gums are the most common bark type. The bark is on most of the trunk, and on the branches it's smooth, and as the bark sheds annually, it leaves a cream or grey trunk. And some gums retain their bark around the base, and sometimes that extends all the way up the trunk. With stringy barks, they are usually tall and straight and have thick, widely furrowed, dead bark which is fibrous and can be pulled off in strands. The bark is retained on the tree trunk and branches. In peppermints, the bark on the local species is grey and persistent on the trunk and branches, and the fibres are close and interlaced. We do have one Indigenous species of ironbark, Eucalyptus tricarpa, or red ironbark, and the bark is almost black, very hard, thick and deeply furrowed on the trunk and branches. And then we have the box species, where the bark is persistent on the trunk, short fibred, thin and flaky or scaly. We can then focus on the buds, the leaves and the fruits, which also aid in the identification of eucalypts. When you look at the eucalyptus bud shape, it varies between the species as well. So this operculum here or cap can range from being flat, pointed or elongated, waxy or glossy, knobbly or angular. The leaf shape, as you can see, all the different types here, is also a very helpful indication of what species they are. And the leaf shape can range from oval, narrow, linear, disc-shaped, oblique or uneven at the base, round and even united around the stem, just like this one here. The shape of the juvenile leaf is also really important as well in identification. When you look at the eucalyptus fruit parts and the valves, the size and the shape of the fruits are equally important in identification. They can range from being rounded, cup-shaped, triangular, or even being described as being shaped like a wine glass, barrel, or bell. And where the valves sit as well is another important trait. Are they exerted? Are they flat or equal with the rim, or are they sunken in? And when you put the combination of all these traits together, the habitat, the habit, bark, leaves, buds and fruits, you get the following. So now I'm going to run through some of the more common species in northeast Melbourne. And firstly is the messmate or Eucalyptus obliqua. It has these glossy leaves that are oblique or uneven, as you can see here at the base of the stem. It's rough, stringy bark. They have barrel-shaped fruit with sunken valves. And now I don't have a photo, but the buds are rounded at the top. They have a wide-ranging habitat, and in this instance, it's at the local school near my house. The Bundy is next, or the longleaf box, which is the Eucalyptus goniocalex. They have these long, thin green leaves, and the peduncles here, or the stalks that attach the fruits and buds to the stem, are flattened. That's really distinctive for this species. They have cup-shaped fruit with valves at the rim level or below. And these buds are long and conical. Also, with the flattened peduncles, the buds and the fruits are also slightly angled. And this is a really useful trait to take note of. And also, hence the name, gonia, meaning angled, and calyx, which is the outer part of a flower. And that's one of them there. Next is the red stringy bark, Eucalyptus macrorinca. It's a stringy bark, so it has this thick fibrous bark. It has oblique leaves as well, uneven at the base. Broad hemispherical fruit with exerted valves, which is distinct amongst these stringy barks by its beaked buds and large fruits with massive domed disc. And the clue of that is in its name, macros, meaning large, and rhynchos, meaning snout or beak. And the buds are also beaked. It's widespread and common on dry or exposed sites. However, the red stringy barks are showing a significant stress and die-off at the moment, potentially because of the sustained dry periods or drought we're having, followed by the sustained wet periods. So it's not really doing well and dying due to these significant changes in weather pattern and hydrological changes. Next, we have the red box or Eucalyptus polyanthemos. It's a very pretty tree. The bark is rough, tightly held and finely fissured, which is typical of a box species. The leaves are distinctly round or broad and this lovely dull blue-green with sometimes waxy branchlets. The fruit are cone to barrel-shaped with the valve below the rim, and the buds are somewhat rounded on top. They are found to grow on hills and drier slopes. And they're very easy to identify, the red box in our area, due to the very round, broad, dull blue-green leaves. Next, we've got the yellow box, the Eucalyptus meliodora. And this species is a really important honey tree. and grows in a variety of areas except for the most wetter habitats. The name means of honey, malice, and smell, odora. The bark is rough, loose and fibrous, sometimes occurring up to the top branches, but can really vary. The juvenile and adult leaves are bluish to blue-green, and the buds are small and conical. The fruits are rounded to barrel shape, with the valve below the rim or hidden. Next is the swamp gum, Eucalyptus ovata, with the name referring to the ovate or egg-shaped leaves. It's a gum bark species, rough on the lower parts and then smooth. Adult leaves are wide, glossy, and sometimes wavy around the edges, as you can see here. The buds are diamond-shaped and the fruits are triangular, with the valves at the rim level or slightly exerted. And it's pretty widespread in the wetter or swampy areas. Next, we have the manna gum, Eucalyptus viminalis. And the scientific name for this refers to the leaves being viminous or Lycaonosia wattle, so very European. However, for our first peoples, it was an important source of manna, which is a sticky substance that exudes from it. They were used for a variety of different purposes, including for medicinal purposes. And actually, the Wurundjeri people take their name from the Woiwurrung word for manna gum, wurrung, and jerry, the grub that is found in or near the tree. It's also a very important tree for koalas, being their main food source in the area. When we come to the traits of a manna gum, the bark is smooth, gum-barked. The juvenile leaves are also really important in distinguishing it from other similar species such as candlebarks. In manna gums, the juvenile leaves are lance-shaped, and you'll see in the next slide that candlebark juvenile leaves are round. The adult leaves in a manna gum are also lance-shaped but glossy green, and the buds are conical and in threes, and the fruits are conical and rounded with an ascending disc and exerted valves. The fruits, buds and leaves are not waxy, and in our local area they occur along the Yarra River and in some of the bigger creeks like the Diamond Creek or Mullum Creek. However, they can also be found up in Strathewen and St Andrews near Kinglake National Park. And lastly, there's the candlebarks, or Eucalyptus rubida. Rubida meaning red, which refers to the seasonally reddish bark. And I think this tree is probably one of the more beautiful trees with smooth bark that is usually pale grey to tan and pinkish red. And when the sun is shining, it looks like a candle lit up. The juvenile leaves are rounded, dull grey and waxy, which helps it to distinguish it from a manna gum. They're the juvenile leaves there. The adult leaves are lance-shaped and they can sometimes be waxy. The buds are conical and in threes as well, and the fruit is waxy, conical and rounded with an ascending disc and exerted valves. And candlebarks typically occur within gullies and creek lines, and the habitat crosses over with manna gums. Now, there are so many other local species that I could describe, but I think I'll end it there on some of the more common ones. There's a number of different resources as well that you could use that will help you to identify some of your more local eucalypts, including the Flora of Melbourne, Native Trees and Shrubs of Southeastern Australia. We also have our Live Local, Plant Local Nillumbik Shire Council publication as well. And there's also a number of different specific eucalypt books. In addition to that, there's websites, and you can also, when you're able to, come to the council offices as well if you need some help with identifying your species. So thank you for listening to me, and I really hope you enjoyed that. It was a tremendous amount of information, pardon the pun. But I'm looking forward to any questions you may have that I'll try and answer as best I can at the end. But now Before I hand over to Emma, I just wanted to extend my thanks to the people within my team and beyond who have willingly allowed me to use their photos as well. So thanks, and Emma is now going to cover Edendale Nursery's role in local revegetation and what advice we provide regarding planting and maintenance of eucalypts.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Julia. That was amazing. I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. I'll just turn my video off. Great. So, my name is Emma and I'm a nursery officer at Edendale Indigenous Nursery. Tonight I'm going to cover the nursery's role in local revegetation and what advice we provide regarding the planting and maintenance of eucalyptus. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we work on and the plants that we grow, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. There is an undeniable link between the livelihoods of their ancestors and the local eucalyptus trees. Connection to country is so clearly demonstrated through acknowledging the many ways the Wurundjeri people utilise eucalypts, from the bark and wood to the leaves and the sap. For example, here on the left, we have the peppermint leaves being used for a smoking ceremony, and on the right, a river red gum that's been used to carve out a canoe. So, Edendale Indigenous Nursery was established to provide a wide range of Indigenous plants from the Shire of Nillumbik to both the retail and wholesale market. We have many loyal wholesale customers ranging from revegetation groups, community groups and schools, landscapers, commercial nurseries, and of course our enthusiastic retail customers. A vital part of the nursery's dynamic is our volunteer program, which sees around 30 volunteers a week come in, have a chat and propagate our wonderful stock. We miss them a lot right now. So there are around 27 species of eucalypt in the Melbourne area, and we propagate around 13 of these. So the most common local species ranging from moist conditions to very dry. We have something for every spot. We mainly produce tube stock, but also some 15 centimetre pots. So how it works is we get a contractor to collect all the seed from within the Nillumbik area. Then we sow them and we prick them out into tubes just after they develop their little dicot leaves, and then off into the hothouse. They're then hardened off for a few weeks and then purchased and off into the soil. Eucalypts always impress me with how gigantic they grow from such humble beginnings as a tiny little seed, as I've shown here. That's actually at Edendale. So the provenances of these seeds are recorded all the way through propagation to ensure that revegetation projects are supplied with genetically compatible stock to put back into these areas. Retail customers get a bonus when they buy, because often it's the appearance that draws them in, but these plants are perfectly suited to local soils and conditions and are the most preferable to other fauna as habitat. One of my favourite things about working at Edendale Nursery is following the process from seed to plant, giving life to this tiny little thing that will one day provide for others, as we have in its infancy. These eucalypts will eventually become food, shade, shelter and stability for the smallest of fungi and insects to the largest of mammals. So on to some planting advice. One of the first things I discuss with customers is space and whether they have enough. For example, the red box is probably the smallest eucalypt we sell, but even then its minimum height is 7 meters and it can reach up to 25 meters high. A lot of the time, customers are after the aesthetic of a eucalypt, but not the size. This is where we would suggest a grafted or dwarf variety, which many commercial nurseries provide. Then we determine the type of soil, the structure, slope, drainage, how dry or moist, etc. For moister areas, we recommend things like swamp gums, peppermints or mannock gums, like Julia went into. And for dry areas, we would suggest things like boxes or red ironbark. Nillumbik tends to have heavy clay and shallow topsoils. So if the spot is particularly solid, we suggest mixing compost in or some other organic matter when you're backfilling. Even applying some gypsum to break up the clay before planting will help. And fertilizer is not necessarily needed as the plants are already highly adapted to the local conditions. It can also encourage weed growth. The ideal spot to plant eucalypts should have full sun to semi-shade, and don't worry about how exposed that spot is because that's where the stakes and guards come in, which I'll go into in a sec. The best time to plant is autumn to early winter because the rainfall is higher, temperatures are mild, and plants have a fair few months to establish before the harshness of summer. Often large re-veg plantings can't be watered, so they make sure to plant at the right time and let the seasons take care of the rest. Spring is also a good time to plant for heavy frost areas. Now, to plant well, you first want to make sure the soil is free from any weeds and ideally mulched to a minimum of 10 millimeters thick. And here are some of the things you will need for planting. So we've got a tube of a eucalypt and a spade, a bucket or watering can or hose or any sort of thing that you can water your plants in with, and stakes and guards and a mallet. So this on the left here is a core flute stake, which is a rigid type of plastic and one stake. And then on the right, we've got another style which we sell at Edendale, and that needs 3 stakes. So the hole should be dug twice the size of the tube to break up the soil beneath and around. It shouldn't be dug so perfectly that it forms a glazed hole. This can encourage circulating roots. So you want to get the edge of the spade and cut rough edges into a hole. A square is actually a better shape. The roots will find the corners and go down from there. Then you can pour a bucket of water into the hole and soak it in to prepare the soil. The plant itself should be moist, so if it isn't, just submerge that in the bucket of water to wick up any dry bits. Then you can gently slide the plant out from the tube by squeezing it and tapping it on something hard. Eucalypts do dislike root disturbance, so there's no need to tease or trim the roots. Then you can place it into the hole. When backfilling, ensure that there's no large stones or clumps and fill to the original soil line of the tube. You shouldn't see any roots. Leave the soil level around the plant slightly lower than the surrounding earth so that it forms like a little dip that will become a reservoir for water to collect in. Then it's time to apply stakes and guards. This is standard practice for revegetation plantings, as the plastic still allows light through while protecting the new growth from browsing animals, harsh sun, wind, and frost, etc. Tender new growth of eucalypts is particularly sensitive to frost. The mulch should also be pushed back so that it's not touching the stem of the plant. Then you can water in with either plain water or sea salt, which helps reduce root shock. Ensure a deep watering to settle in the soil and remove any air pockets. It's good to inspect your new eucalypt plantings regularly and see how they're going, especially once the weather warms up. They'll probably require a few good soaks through the first summer, and wind tends to dry out new plants as well, as we've noticed over the last few days. It's better to do a deep water less often than a shallow water regularly. This ensures that the water travels deeply into the soil, which will make the roots go deeper down and make the plants more resilient. For re-veg projects, or if you're just trying to encourage more fauna in your garden, then consider planting not just trees, but an understory as well of shrubs, grasses, ground covers, and flowering herbs or lilies. Eucalypts on their own will create an open parkland look, which is great for big birds like magpies, noisy miners, and ravens, but without any protective smaller shrubs, the wildlife will be limited. Established eucalypts drink up a lot of moisture, so consider hardy species to plant around them. For example, acacias, burgan, wallaby grasses, and salt bushes. That's about it. That sums it up. I've provided some pictures of some resources as well if you're interested in learning more. Some of these Julia already mentioned. So on the left here, we've got the Live Local, Plant Local guide, which is available on the Nillumbik website as a digital PDF. That's got really good basic planting and maintenance advice and plant recommendations. Flora of Melbourne is what we use in the nursery, and a lot of Indigenous nurseries use around Melbourne. Really good for ID, for taking with you out in the field. And then these are some books from Leon Kostemans, who is an expert in eucalypt ID, and his books are really detailed if you're interested in learning more. So thank you very much for listening, and for Julia and Kate and Steph and everyone for helping out. All right.
That's great. All right, are you ready for some questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have...
Absolutely.
Oh, they're going crazy. All right, we'll just start from there.
Let's go.
Do eucalypts tend to cohabit roughly between at least 3 species in the area, in areas? I think that question, thank you Daniel, is just around, do we normally find species mixed, or lots of all candlebugs or all red boxes?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends on where you are in the landscape. So there definitely are some areas where you will only find redbox growing, or you will only find manigums growing. You know, particularly around the river and stuff. So Yarra River, you will tend to mainly find manigums growing there, and then it'll start to shift into the ecotones and swampy depressions and that, which will tend to shift the different type of species that will grow there. But yeah, you don't always find a mix of species. Yeah.
Very good. This is another curly one, also from Daniel. Why is there an isolated endemic tricarpa colony in Nillumbik, but only occurs again on Wathaurong country by Aries Inlet?
Yeah, that, I did see that question. That's a really interesting one, Daniel. Thank you. Look, I reckon that's probably a just a result of the clearing of habitat that's occurred, but also there is a break in the type of habitat. So once you start getting west of Melbourne, you get into the volcanic plains, which is predominantly grasslands. So yes, Eucalyptus tricarpa does occur pretty much, or its range should occur pretty much from east of Melbourne all the way up through to Aries Inlet and across to Lorne. but you have these gaps because of the volcanic plains that occur in between. Interestingly enough, the species also occurs out in East Gippsland. So it has these very different types of habitats that it can grow in.
Very good. Okay. So Natasha's asked, can you recommend a good book to take on walks to help with Eucalypt ID?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Emma.
No, go for it.
Hold back, Julia. You've got to share the questions, all right?
I know, right? The Leon Costermans one is great. This is the native trees and shrubs of southeastern Australia. As well as that, he does have a smaller version, which is pocket-sized, which is much more easier to carry when you're out in the field. The other one I absolutely love as well is this one here, which is the Eucalypts by Dean Nichol, the Eucalypts of Victoria and Tasmania. Really useful. It goes into the different types of bark and buds, and it has these really great colour photos as well and distribution maps too. So this book's really detailed, a bit heavier to take obviously, but I find it really useful. Emma, if you've got any other ones you recommend, go for it.
I would have recommended them as well. I had the pictures of the Leon Costermans, and Laura of Melbourne's really good too, but I think not the only thing you should have on you if you're into your Eucalypt ID.
Yeah, I should probably know as well. You know, if you've got your smartphone on you, you can bring that up quite easily. And the Flora Victoria now has a much more easier way in which you can ID eucalypts. So you can type in specific traits that you're noticing on the eucalypts rather than actually going through a key, which can be a little bit more time consuming. So yeah, it's got that functionality now for the eucalypt species, and I think for the Asteraceae as well.
Great. Okay. Can you comment on how climate change affects the different tree species, and what are you observing around the Shire and around the region more generally in terms of climate impacts?
Yeah, I think the main species that is struggling that we're noticing are the red stringy barks. They're really, really struggling through those really wild changes in the weather patterns that are occurring. That's probably one of the main ones that we're seeing that's not doing so well. The other one would probably be the manna gums as well. They're tending to suffer a lot more with the wild weather that we're having. We're seeing a lot fall over. Heaps fell over through the recent storms that we've had as well. So yep, climate change is definitely impacting eucalypt species, no doubt.
Okay. Do you have any tips to identify how old a eucalypt might be?
I've heard that it's roughly the diameter. So if it's a 30 centimetre diameter, it could be around 30 years old. Similar to like when you're looking at
you're probably right, Emma. There's probably a lot of dendroequal. Exactly. If you you know, happen to have one fall down, or you've cut off a branch, you can count the tree rings. That's exactly right. So yeah, there would be some dendroecological studies that have occurred on certain species to determine ways in which you can age them. Yeah.
This is not necessarily a tree question, but Emma, is Edendale considering click and collect services? Because we've got some eager planters out there that really want their trees.
I know. It's awful having to say no to so many people. And there's just a mass shortage around Melbourne at the moment. But in keeping in line with the current restrictions, we're still closed to the public.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
So everyone just needs to hang tight. Get your site preparation ready, order your mulch, get your mulching done. So as soon as you can get those plants, you can just get them in and everything's all ready.
That's right. We'll keep you informed on our social media and our website and everything. But yeah, because we're council run, our policy is not necessarily going to match those of other retail nurseries.
Good point.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Okay. Can you predict the weather by the prompt of a eucalypt status? Example, eucalypt cephalocarpa and eucalypt radiata were almost ready to set seed just prior to high wind events.
Look, I probably couldn't answer that question with great an educated response. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that one. Emma, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, yeah. So the seed release does respond to different, I guess, weather or heat indications. So yes, they will dry out and release their seed, but whether that's in response to it predicting what's happening with the weather, I'm not sure. I mean, it could just be that it's dried out and they're ready to drop, and yeah, but I couldn't answer that with great and educated response behind me, unfortunately.
Very good question. Again, from Daniel. I think Daniel is winning the brain teaser.
The curly ones. Thanks, Daniel.
Very curly. So Paula asks, is it okay to use gypsum on our bush block? Emma, you talked about gypsum earlier. Can you describe how gypsum might be used in planting?
Yeah, so gypsum breaks up clay, and I think you can get it in like a powdered form or a liquid gypsum form. Either way, you just follow the instructions on the product that you've purchased and work it into the soil and water it in. Make sure it's mixed up well so that it can start breaking down that clay and making it a bit more gentle on the plant. But eucalypts are so tough, and they're made for this soil. So unless it's really really hard clay, then it's not completely required. Yeah.
Okay. We've got another question from Daniel. Again, a very good question. He wonders, do you think there are links between Ovata, Camaldulensis, urensis, and manna-gums? I think he might mean genetic links.
Yep. Yes, probably. There's probably, for most of the gumbark species, some sort of genetic link. But where that occurs, I'm not 100% sure. I think from memory, Eucalyptus camaldulensis is more closely related to swamp gums, Eucalyptus ovata, than it is to manna gums. But yeah, I couldn't 100% say that with certainty. I'm not fully aware of the genetics behind the different eucalypt species, but I could imagine that the different gumbark species would be somewhat closely related.
Okay.
I've just posted a link on the Vic Flora website.
Great.
Which is really helpful. We use that as well at work. So.
Julie, you had some fossil photos that you put up. How old are they?
They've been dated to be around 51.9, I think, million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Let me check my notes. Yep, 51.9 million years ago. So from the Eocene period. Very old. And yeah, as I said, because they look really similar to today's eucalypt species, they probably think they've evolved even earlier than that. So fascinating.
Absolutely. Emma, if I go into the nursery, this is a question from Neil, but it's a very good one. If I go into the nursery and I'm looking for a species that is resistant to cinnamon fungus, what's your expertise? What do you reckon?
I'm not too experienced on the cinnamon fungus. I'm not sure whether one species of eucalypt would be more resistant than another to that. What do you think about that, Julia? You see it in the area?
Yeah, Emma, I'm not 100% sure with the local species, which ones are or aren't more resistant. I guess that's something that we can follow up for the person who's given us the question, Steph. More than happy to do that.
All right. We'll get back to you on that, Neil.
We've just had a comment in the chat that ash and stringy bark eucalypts are the most susceptible. So the opposite that comes, and peppermints possibly. But yeah, if we can try and get a more certain answer, then we'll provide that.
Joan asks, and I actually had to check this in case Joan was just being naughty and trying to make me say something really stupid, but I think she's legit. What type of eucalyptus is commonly called bastard box?
Yes, there is one. Oh gosh, I googled it. Left my brain. No, there's. It is one of the string.
Elafolia.
Sorry, say again.
Elafolia. Elaeophloia. I think I really botched that.
That's all right. No, there is a local species that is given that name as well. I'm pretty sure it's the Bundy, the longleaf box. I'm pretty sure.
So why is it called that?
Because it's such hard wood.
Oh, so it's around cutting the timber or chopping it for firewood or...
Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Very interesting. Thanks, Joan.
So it's not a silly question.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. Stuart the beekeeper, he asks, is currently planting some eucalyptus at his place, and what are the best species to plant for pollen and nectar?
Yellow box.
Yeah, yellow box.
Absolutely. And it's got a good wide variety of habitats that it can occur. So yeah, I'll definitely recommend that.
Delicious. Daniel wonders what app is used for the identification, and apparently Flora Victoria doesn't come up on Google Play.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, Emma did send that link for the Flora Victoria. It's not an actual app; it's a website. So yeah, you won't be able to download it per se.
There is an app though. I don't know if you know about it, Julia, but my co-worker was showing me the other day and we were having a play. It's called Euclid.
No, I don't know that one.
I can I'll find a link for it. It's very detailed. So if you have the patience to enter through all of the little filter boxes, it's really comprehensive though. And it is an app that you might have to pay for, but yeah, if you're interested, it's really good. So I'll just send that link now.
Thanks, Emma.
Very good. David asks, it is said that the ironbark species in Nillumbik have white or cream flowers. However, the street trees on David Street have pink flowers. And he wonders, are they not a local species?
Yeah, probably not. The pink-flowered ironbark is a Sideroxylon. Oh, gosh, I always get this one. Sideroxylon. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, it's a tricky one. That's the red ironbark. So yeah, it's most likely the incorrect species for the area.
Excellent. Which eucalypt species are the least flammable? From Anne.
Well,
They all have the volatile oils in the leaves. So whatever's the least fragrant, maybe. What do you think, Julia?
Yeah, flammability is an interesting one because it depends on such a range of different conditions. So you probably couldn't pinpoint directly which one is more flammable than another because it just depends on the conditions that you're in and the likelihood of you know, whether the fire is a moderate or a cool fire or a, you know, fairly intense fire. So, you know, there's definitely species that do carry fire more up the trunk because of the bark, more so than other species. But yeah, it's really dependent on the conditions at the time.
And not on fire, but also on another kind of critical feature of use, but which gums are prone to losing limbs without warning?
I guess the river red gum's probably one of the more well known to just drop its limbs at random.
And sugar gums as well?
Yeah, sugar gums can do that too. I'm not sure of the triggers. Emma, I'm not sure if you have heard or are aware of what actually triggers them to just drop their limbs. But
I've heard that it's because if it's after a period of drought, it's kind of like to preserve what they've got left. But usually you can sort of see when there's a bit of weakness or branch that's getting a bit too thick and heavy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and with the heavy winds we've been having, could happen to any tree.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so this is from Gemma. What are your tips for identifying manna gums and candlebarks in the absence of juvenile leaves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The waxiness is sometimes a good thing to look for. So the candlebarks being a little bit more waxy compared to the manna gums in their adult leaves. But really I'd be looking at the habitat you're in. So generally in the sort of major creeks and the rivers, you will have manna gums. Whereas when you're looking at the gullies that don't have that continuous flow of water, that's where you'll start to get your candlebarks growing more so than manna gums. It's difficult, very, very difficult to tell the difference between the two. But yeah, in terms of in Nillumbik, for instance, you really would only get manna gums on the Diamond Creek or Arthurs Creek or the Yarra River, those major creek lines. Yep.
Very good. So this is a question from Jamie. Are there any organisations or charities in southeastern Australia that are restoring habitat, i.e. putting aside cleared land and planting big eucalypts to lock down large amounts of carbon? I believe E. regnans is still on record as the greatest carbon sequestration system ever measured, right?
Look, I can't answer that very well. I guess there are definitely organisations that are planting trees as carbon offsets. So organisations like Green Fleet. Yeah. But in terms of what species they're growing, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I'm not able to answer that confidently. Sorry, Jamie.
Okay. There you go, Jamie. Green Fleet. Shelby asks, I've heard that when eucalypts sprout foliage from their trunks after extreme fire, that it is their last attempt of survival, but will still likely die. Is this true?
Look, they're definitely obviously weakened after a fire. It's probably not their, well, it's a survival mechanism. So it's just one way in which they could potentially help itself to survive. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that because they've sent out their those growths that they're going to die because they've done that. They might die for a different reason. They might start getting fungal attack, or because they're already weakened because of the fire. So yeah, I guess the epicormic growth is just a really good way of helping it to survive, rather than it sort of, you know, I mean, yes, it is kind of a last-ditch effort, so to speak, but they can quite happily survive a fire and, yeah, letting out their epicormic growth because of that. Yeah.
Awesome. D. Fernando asks about hybridization of eucalypt species, and they're aware of E. studliensis, and are there any others?
Yeah, there's plenty of hybridization of eucalypt species, definitely. Eucalyptus studliensis is a hybrid between Eucalyptus ovata and I've forgotten the other one, but they definitely do hybridize. And I guess that's one of the reasons why we always try to encourage Indigenous species being planted, because if you start to introduce other species, there is that potential to for them to crossbreed and I guess reduce the genetic viability of those species. Yeah. Emma, okay. If you want to expand on that, go for it.
No, I do know that there's hybridizations, but I'm definitely not an expert with that. But Indigenous plants are the way to go.
In saying that, though, there obviously are hybrids that occur naturally as well. Not yet, just because we're planting. Exactly.
Yeah, I think it mentions that in the blurb in the Flora of Melbourne at the start of the eucalypt section. It says that there's 27 species, but there's also hybridizations, and that's just part of nature.
Yep, that's right.
Very good. So Sharon asks about eucalypts around the house, and we might have arborists in to prune. Do you have any recommendations about pruning?
No, sorry. Yeah, speak to an arborist. Sorry, Sharon.
I was taught that you should not prune anything over 2 meters or something. You should get an arborist. So unless you're a trained arborist, don't get up a ladder and prune a eucalypt. It's very
great advice there, Emma. Safety first. Get your arborist.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon asks, I would like to replant a desert ash with an Indigenous gum. Should I prepare the soil in any way prior to planting the gum? And I presume it means that there's something going in the place where there was the desert ash.
I don't think the desert ash has any allelopathic qualities. As long as the soil is soft enough for you to dig a hole into, then a eucalypt will probably survive there. But if you want to take extra measures, like I said before, you can add a little bit of compost or a little bit of organic matter into the soil, just mix it through, but not too much. Yeah.
So if Sharon was replanting with if say the previous species had been allopathic, how might that change your recommendations?
Well, eucalypts are pretty tough, so I guess maybe it would just be a matter of time and working through some compost to deactivate those compounds, or adding a bit more other soil in. But I think once they get to a certain size, it wouldn't be a problem, to be honest.
So Matthew asks, what's the best time to gather seeds? And do you have any tips for gathering seeds for propagation?
I would probably say any time, as long as they've got their woody capsules. You can collect them, dry them out, or smoke treat them, and you'll be able to collect seeds. Do you agree, Emma?
Yeah, you just keep an eye on the trees that you're after and when they're fruiting and when they're seeding. And then you can just put them in a paper bag until the little capsules pop open. Yeah, they'll likely need some sort of treatment for the seeds. There's plenty of books and online references on how to treat a seed if it needs some sort of smoke treatment or scarification prior to sowing.
Great. This is a really interesting question from Alana. Why do you think eucalypts have become such a weed overseas?
Oh, they can just grow anywhere. You know, they are so hardy. I remember going to my mum's tiny hometown in the middle of Calabria in Italy and seeing eucalypts growing there. They will grow absolutely anywhere. They're really well adapted. They can tolerate a whole range of different soil types, and I don't know if that's got to do with their evolution, and you know, I guess they used to grow around Patagonia, and you know, yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I've done a fair bit of travel, and I'll just smell this. I'll feel like home all of a sudden. I'm like, what's that? And then there'll be a whole forest of eucalypts. And I get confused and wonder where I am. And yeah, eucalypts are pretty much designed to outcompete everything else and even thrive off fire rather than be threatened by it. So in areas like California that gets a lot of wildfires now, it's making even more gum trees pop up and less of the other native trees, unfortunately. Yeah, they're a real problem.
Yep.
Lucky, that's the one problem we don't have here.
Yeah.
We get all their other feral species. Grass is always greener.
That's it.
This question, I have some smaller gums which are not flowering. Do you have any tips on how I can get them to flower? Watering?
Are they getting enough sun?
Very good.
I know that things like sun to flower. Maybe they just need to grow a bit taller so they can reach that sunlight. Maybe they're still too young and they've got too many juvenile leaves to produce flowers and fruit. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one.
No, I'm not either.
All the questions have all jumped around. Okay. Danelle asks, is it recommended to plant understory species once the eucalypts have established, or can you plant the eucalypts and the understory species at the same time?
Julia, do you have an answer for that? Because I would think that it's best to do it all at the same time, because that's a lot of the time what our re-veg groups do. They all order the gum trees with everything else, and it means that the roots can sort of figure out where they stand as they grow instead of leaving like an already really established eucalypt.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, that's how I would recommend that revegetation occurs, that you just plant them all at the same time. They start to find their little niches under the soil in terms of their root zones and stuff. So it's probably best to do it all at the same time. Yep.
Yeah.
Michelle asks, why are there no river red gums in Nillumbik?
There's river red gums. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where might you find them in Nillumbik?
Probably more on the west side. So sort of bordering Whittlesea area. Yep. Yep. We definitely have river red gums. I'm trying to think if there's any around more centrally. We also have Eucalyptus blakeri as well. Oh, what's the common name for that, Emma?
Blakely's red gum.
Thanks. That's great.
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, I've got so many names floating through my head.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah,
So Bug Boy
do tend to be a lot more on the western Melbourne. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Bug Boy asks, are deer or roos impacting on any re-veg or natural regeneration in Nillumbik?
Oh, deer for sure.
Definitely.
Yep. Deer will browse on anything. Roos probably less so. They're a bit more, I guess, picky in terms of what they will and won't eat, but deer will just smash anything. They're a real problem at the moment.
And wallabies tend to nibble things more than kangaroos.
Yeah.
And possums.
Yes, possums are another. Yep.
Rabbits.
You've got it all.
Yep.
What species are used to make eucalyptus oil products?
I think one of them is the peppermint, either the radiata or the divas, the broadleaf or the narrowleaf peppermint. I know they're used commercially, but there's probably others as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, lemon scented gum, Corymbia citriodora. It's not actually eucalypt anymore.
Yep.
That's used for essential oils, and it's a really good insect repellent as well.
Very interesting. Tim asks, do you know if there is an evolutionary advantage or disadvantage to swamp gums not having oil glands like other eucalyptus?
Oh, thanks, Tim. I wasn't aware that swamp gums didn't have any oil glands. So that's an interesting point. But I would assume that maybe it's not an advantage or disadvantage, but maybe it's just an evolutionary trait of occurring within more wetter areas. So therefore, maybe not needing to burn more often or not burning more often than other species. So maybe it's lost that I guess ability to produce oil glands. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting one. I didn't know that about the species.
Annie Kent asks, are there any guided walks in the area? Do we have any eucalypt walks? Any guided tours? Eucalypt guided tours?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I mean, I guess we definitely have. Yeah, we've got areas that that we definitely can. People can walk, but they're not particularly guided, so to speak. No, I don't think so.
It's a good idea, though.
Yep. I like the whole question. I hope you're asking that, Steph.
What?
You'll get to it.
About Ben?
Yeah.
Next one. Yeah.
That's a good
Obviously,
question.
we can settle that argument. Emma, the expert, did say that it should be a square hole, not a round hole, or it should have jagged edges. You can't do a round hole. You get the roots.
Yeah, I saw that. I think if you're just doing a basic hole and it's round, that's fine. But some people are like perfectionists and they'll make a really perfect round hole that's glazed at the sides and the clay is really smooth, and then the roots will like they won't find a way through that, and then they'll just curl. So yeah, you can do a square, you can do a triangle, you can do a hexagon, whatever. Just have edges in your hole, have rough corners, and those roots will find that opportunity and they'll go down from there. No one's
good. Well, I hope that kind of settles your argument, Ben. And this is a good one from Angela. Which species of eucalypts are better at forming hollows for wildlife nesting?
Oh, well,
the red gums are really good for that, aren't they? And
yeah, definitely. I mean, they all produce hollows at different times. So, yeah, I don't know, unfortunately, which are best. You're right, though, Emma. Red gums and some of the other gum species, like manna gums and that, do tend to produce really good hollows. Yeah, but, yeah, they all do it, and they all do it at different times. Yeah.
Tim asks, is a gum different to a eucalypt?
No. Well, I guess a gum is a sort of general term for any eucalypt species, really, or Corymbia or Angophora. You can't really rely on common names to determine what is or isn't a eucalyptus species. But in saying that, there are gum barked species, and then there's just ones that are generally called gums. So
yeah, I think it's just semantics. Like it's a group. It's just like a common name for eucalypts for referring to those types of trees, but it's also a classifying term, like gum, stringy bark, box, when referring to the specific bark types. So it's both.
We'll just clarify for Sue. So there was a question earlier on pruning eucalypts, and your recommendation was just seek professional assistance with euc pruning, and probably we would expect that our arborist would be thoughtful around the timing of the pruning too, about when that eucalyptus might be best pruned.
Yeah, so I think it's best to prune in summer because they'll heal faster.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the sap's running around more. So yeah, you want those wounds to heal well. So yeah, warmer weather is best.
Perfect. An excellent question here from Florence. What medicinal purposes were the manna gums used for? And that's besides ceremonial use.
Yeah, that is a really good question, Florence. I would probably leave a question like that to be answered from an Indigenous a person. I guess from what I'm aware of, I think they may have used the leaves for medicinal purposes, maybe for smoking, for not smoking, but for using
for respiratory.
Yeah. But if there's anyone on the chat that knows the answer to that question, that'd be really useful. Yeah.
Wait and see if anything comes up on the chat. The chat is going absolutely nuts. I'm not even going there. Just it's going wild. It's good. It's good wild. Ivan asked, what's the fastest growing species by volume?
Generally, the tallest tend to grow the fastest. So, yeah, a Polyanthumus, like a red box, is quite short at the same age, like in the nursery, at the same age as, what else do we have that's tall? I don't know, Meliodora or Blakeleyi. They'll be taller when they're the same age. Yeah, they've got a lot of growing to do. So yeah, the taller ones will grow the tallest. That's all I can say.
That's very sensible. So another question from Bug Boy. Emma, in your second last photo of the plantings on the hillside, was the grass mown or sprayed? And while we're on that, do you find any, in terms of site preparation, how would you decide your site preparation technique?
So I think it's referring to the one that had a lot of little stakes and guards that was just planted out.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually off the internet, so I didn't take that, and I'm not aware if the grass was sprayed or not. It could be mulch. I think it might, if they were doing the right thing, then those strips would be mulch. So you'd want to spray the grass if it's kikuyu or cooch or anything that's really going to just strangle the soil, and then you can mulch on top of that so that the roots of the eucalypt won't be competing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was the other part of that question?
The second part was just around how you would decide like what site preparation you'd need for that particular planting. And I think you've answered it. You know, obviously if you've got running grasses as the base, then you would need more severe site preparation, which might include herbicides. But if you say it was in a much in a non-running grass base, would mowing be enough, or would you need to spray?
I would only spray if you really need to. Otherwise, hand weeding and mowing and just clearing like a small radius for where the tree and the mulch will go will be enough. Yeah.
Okay, so Ben asks, are there dominant species that you think our bushland needs, as in lost elders that were supporting the rest more than others, or just plant any?
I don't necessarily think there's species that are missing. I think more that there's trees that are unable to reach a mature size because of the way the land has been used in the past. So particularly in Nillumbik, a lot of the trees were cut for firewood for the bakeries. And a lot of the trees that have come back have grown really close to each other. So they're quite small and you don't get to see those really big mature trees that you would normally see in a landscape that hasn't been modified quite as much. So I think it's just a result of the past land use more so than whether or not those lost elders need to come back, or those dominant species need to come back. I think the landscape needs to be assisted more so to be able to allow those trees to mature into much larger tree sizes. So yeah, it's an interesting question though.
Very good. Okay, I'm smiling because I go to answer the next question. I'm like, it's my dad. Being a snake.
I love it.
Hi, Mr. Eucalypt. What is an ash eucalypt, and do we have them local to us?
So an ash would be, I would assume you'd be referring to a mountain ash, which is a Eucalyptus regnans. In Nillumbik, you would find them, or you'll start to find them growing in Kinglake National Park. As you move more east, you'll start getting them in the Yarra Ranges. So yeah, up near the Yarra Ranges National Park and that area and the Dandenongs. Yep, so they're definitely close by.
Very good. Hope that answers your question, Dad. So one from Sophie. How fast do eucalyptus grow?
Well, it depends a lot on the conditions and the weather patterns and the quality of the soil and the species. So it's very hard to say. They can put on quite a bit of growth though, if everything goes well. So like a well-planted, healthy ute can put up to 2 or 3 meters of growth a year, apparently. I wrote that down. But yeah, generally the taller the species, the faster the growth.
So this is from Danny. I have remnant red gums in my neighbourhood, McLeod, but I live on a hill and I thought that red gums are near rivers. Do you know why they grow here?
Red gums can occur as well in various places. So yes, they do tend to like rivers and wetter depressions, but depends how high up the hill you are as well, and whether or not it's actually a river red gum and not something else like a Blakely's red gum or but yeah, I mean, it's not unusual in McLeod to have a river red gum growing around there. It's fairly common. Yep. Different soils as well, like they start to get a bit more deeper as you move out that way around Bundoora and McLeod. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this is from Daniel. What ideal conditions trigger seedling growth naturally, particularly in peppermints and stringy barks?
You know that one, Emma?
I wish I had
a fairly one from Daniel.
Yeah. She's the seed queen. Certain or different eucalypts require different treatments, and I'm not aware off the top of my head what the peppermint or stringy barks require. But I guess every seed needs water at some stage. So yeah, a period of regular water and a site that it isn't that heavily nibbled by deer and rabbits and everything. Yeah, that's all I can sort of contribute.
Just had a little scroll down. The questions are just, they never end, but they're really good. So DS asks, is it detrimental to revegetate using eucalypts of non-local provenance if known genetic stock is unavailable?
DS, I think that's really in debate at the moment in terms of provenance, and particularly now as we're looking more towards climate adaptation, and you know, there's a lot of studies that are suggesting that maybe it's wise to take different provenance from more drought tolerant areas and plant them into other areas. So, but it is definitely in debate, the provenance of species use in revegetation projects is a heated one.
We were talking about that today actually at work.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll be talking about that more and more in the future.
Definitely.
So Bernard asks, do any of your stock at Edendale require smoke treatment to aid germination, and how do you treat them? How do you do that?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of our seeds do require smoke treatment. For even the other species like Xanthorrhoeas, some of the acacias I think as well. And you purchase this bright green liquid that's like smoke infused water. It's called smoke water. and it smells like charcoal, smoked meat, kind of weird smoky smell, and you just soak the seeds in that, and that's the equivalent of having a bushfire. Pretty cool. Yeah.
High tech.
Mm.
This is a really lovely question from Jessica. Do you have a favourite eucalypt species?
You go first. I can't narrow mine down.
Oh, that's so tough.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really love the smell of yellow box because I have a very good smell, apparently. And I love the smell of honey, and it makes me happy knowing that all the bees are getting fed. But mountain ash are just stunning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when you see them all together in a temperate rainforest with all the tree ferns, I think they're probably my favourite. Yeah. Yeah,
that's such a hard question. I think it really depends where I am. So if I'm in Mildura, I absolutely love the river red gums up on the river there. They're just so old and amazing and have such character. But then, yeah, exactly, the mountain ash are just these beautiful, tall, humongous trees. Like, you know, you just wonder what they've seen in the time that they've been growing there. And then, of course, the candlebarks are stunning and, you know, light up and have these amazing coloured trunks depending on what the light's showing. So, and then redbox are really pretty, and it just depends. Yep.
Rainbow gums.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah, you don't have one answer for you.
No. Oh, and how good are snow gums? Oh, anyway, sorry.
I just have to pull you back.
Yeah.
Focus. Got lots of questions here.
I sound like a crazy person.
This is another very good question from David. Who can we contact to check whether scars on old trees are of an Aboriginal source?
It's probably worth contacting, well, if you're in this area, the Wurundjeri Council, to see if there's someone who can potentially assess that. You could probably also get a cultural heritage assessment done on your property as well. There's people that can do that.
Great. Jacob wonders, so we talked about hybridization earlier, eucalypts, and are they only able to hybridize with trees of the same bark type?
Possibly. I mean, the ones that I'm aware of, yeah, hybridize between, you know, gums with gums and box with box species. But no, I couldn't say that with full confidence. Emma, I'm not sure if you know more.
No, I don't think I know more than you about that. I guess it would make most sense for them to stick to the closest thing. So yeah, at least the same bark type. And same flowering time. That would make sense.
Yep. Sue asks, is there such a species as rough stringy bark, and what's its botanical name?
Look that one up, Sue. Not off the top of my head. I mean, the ones that we've got in our local area are the messmate stringy bark and the red stringy bark. Brown stringy bark coming into more east of Melbourne. But common names are an interesting one. I'll look it up. Hang on. Not that I can see. You can go to the next question if you want, Steph.
This is a good one from Fiona. Which Indigenous species is the most resistant to termites and why?
Which Indigenous species? I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I'm not an expert on termite control, and
No.
I know that most eucalypts are susceptible to borer, and yeah, those sorts of insects that go into the wood, but they generally attack older and weaker trees or trees with some sort of wound or opening point. So you just want to make sure you have healthy trees. Julia, do you know of any specific?
No, not off the top of my head. No. Yeah. I mean, that's something that we can potentially look into, but yeah. Sorry.
Maybe trees with a tougher fibre, like grain, like the Bundy I was talking about before. That's really hard to cut. Yeah, it's harder to chew. That's just me thinking out loud.
In terms of the rough stringy bark question, I can't find one with a common name, rough stringy bark. Sorry. Maybe there's, could be used in different term, I suppose. Stringy barks are fairly rough.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, it is 8:40 and technically we're meant to finish at 8:30. The feedback form has already been emailed to people, and that's, because we've been such eager beavers and just ploughing through the questions. Do you want to continue with some more questions, or do you want to get to bed? It's 8:41 now.
I don't mind. I'm happy to answer a couple more, and then we'll finish it off.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it.
Don't make them too hard, Steph.
All right.
The coffee's wearing off. No.
Daniel, don't ask any more questions. Yours will way too hard. From Brendan, also on the hybrids. Are there any hybrid eucalypts common in Nillumbik?
The one that springs to mind is yellow box and red box. They tend to hybridize a little bit. You do sometimes find Eucalyptus dudleyensis as well. It's pretty rare in Nillumbik, but it does occur. I can't think of any other ones on top of my head that I'm aware of, but red box and yellow box do or can hybridize as well.
Very good. Daniel's also chimed in the chat. Swamp gums.
Swamp gums. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. Did we have regnans in the area anywhere?
Yep. So up in Kinglake National Park. If you're looking at specifically at Nillumbik area, then yeah.
Abdul asks, I wonder about broad-leaved paperbark. Is it a type of eucalyptus tree?
Broadleaf paperbark.
I don't know that one.
Paperbarks are usually referring to leptospermums?
Or
Melaleucas.
Melaleucas, yep.
Yeah. So
there are broad-leafed mallees and boxes and mountain gums and peppermints, but if you're looking at paperbarks, they're usually Melaleuca species.
Can you clarify the role of yellow box leaves in chemical change to resist insect attack?
Oh, sorry, I got distracted, started looking up paperbark gum. Sorry, there is a paperbark gum
Okay, there we go. Abdul.
Yeah.
Questions answered. There is a paper on that gum.
Sorry.
Sorry. Another
Not in
Kelly
Victoria.
one.
Not in Victoria.
Okay. Another Kelly one. Thank you, Daniel. Can you clarify the role of yellow box leaves in chemical change to resist insect attack?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know much about how they have that adaptation. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, though. It's something I would actually really like to know the answer to as well. Yeah, it's a good one.
I know that trees can communicate to other trees via the fungi if there is something attacking them, and then they will react by putting out more toxins, compounds that insects don't like to eat. But I'm not sure about the specific yellow box.
No, that's an interesting one.
This is a good one for you, Emma, from John. Regarding genetics, do Indigenous nurseries like at Edendale vary their sources to avoid loss of diversity?
We don't do that on purpose. We will try and pick from the same provenance for a revegetation project, because the seed that would have been supplied would have been collected off not just one tree but several, and also seeds aren't a clone of the tree. They contain a lot of DNA variables, so it's different from taking a cutting. So there's actually heaps of genetic diversity already there in the seeds that we've pricked out and that we're giving away to the customers. So yeah,
that's very good to consider. Jen asks, I know you said earlier that eucalypts don't need fertilizer, but can you give young trees sea salt to get them growing taller and stronger?
Yeah, I've heard that sea salt is a good treatment to use on native plants in general, because it doesn't have a lot of phosphorus, which the Proteaceae family doesn't like. Eucalypts are designed to tolerate poor soils, so if you're going to use a fertilizer, I would use it at quite a mild dilution and not too regularly. But yeah, if you wanted to speed up the growth rate, then sea salt would work well.
All right, we're at 8:47.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep going? We'll call it. I've just got
might end it because I think we're losing a few people. So
yeah, we've got 115 people that are battling on, just
listening to us.
Diehard fans. Before we close, I thought I would just remind everyone, I've got a text here from Kate. Kate does all our events. She wants everyone to know that we've got an Eltham Copper Butterfly webinar on the 19th of October. It's going to be rad. So do book in through the Nillumbik website, through the environmental events page. And any other webinars or other suggestions for digital content or other environmental things we can do that's COVID friendly, do flick us an email at environment@nillumbik.vic.gov.au, and you can catch up with Emma in the Edendale Nursery, or you can give Julia a call and ask if she can ID from a leaf.
From my laptop at the moment.
From buzzing photos.
Yeah. Yeah, I can. I'm more than happy to have stuff emailed to me, photos or anything. I'll do my very best. But I do provide that service. So happy to continue that virtually.
Excellent. And this will be recorded. It'll be emailed to everyone that registered, and it will also sit on the Nillumbik website, and you'll get there'll be the video on YouTube, but also the slides will be available. So you can refer back if you're wanting to do some ID practice out in, you know, on the trails or in your backyard.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steph. You did a great job of handling all those questions, and
Thank you.
yeah, that couldn't be easy, so well done.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone that's listened in too. We really appreciate you hearing us waffle on, and hopefully you've managed to pick up a few tips and tricks, and yeah, even just
we did
taken
get up
away.
to 330 people.
Yay, that's great.
So it's pretty awesome.
Great. Yeah, thanks for all the feedback, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Lovely.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.